In India, supernatural horror rarely begins with a jump scare. It begins with a location, a specific point on the map where the ghosts map out the nation's deepest societal wounds. When a country experiences the shock of centuries of colonial rule, followed by the frantic pace of modern globalization, that collective trauma doesn't just vanish, it settles into the stone and mortar. It gets trapped in the floorboards of the places people live, work, and die, turning ordinary buildings into landmarks of a persistent national dread. To understand the modern crises of inequality and environmental collapse, we have to look past the supernatural masks and step inside three distinct rooms of terror. In Satyajit Ray's story, Indigo, the horror is anchored in a 19th century colonial dock bungalow. Isolated and outdated, this senior officer's quarters acts as a physical cage for a past that refuses to stay buried. A modern traveler finds himself stranded here, only to discover his body is no longer his own. He is possessed by the spirit of a long-dead British indigo planter, forced to relive the man's final, desperate hours. This ghost is a manifestation of the indigo trade itself. These laborers, working in massive vats of dye, were part of a system defined by extreme greed and systemic abuse, an industry where profit was extracted through the literal exhaustion of local bodies. The protagonist watches helplessly as his own hands commit acts of cruelty, culminating in the killing of a loyal dog. It is the horror of losing one's moral compass to a history of violence you didn't even commit. Ray shows us that colonial history isn't a closed book. Its injustices leave a permanent stain on the landscape, ensuring that those who occupy these spaces today still carry the weight of that historical guilt. In the film Tumbbad, we move to a decaying mansion built over the womb of Hostar, a forgotten bod cursed for his insatiable hunger for gold. The myth of Hostar establishes a world where wealth is acquired without labor, and consumption has no limit. This ancient god serves as a direct allegory for a modern economic drive that prioritizes accumulation over every other human value. The film's narrative structure is cyclical. We watch as the obsession for Hostar's gold is inherited by the next generation, proving that when the goal is endless wealth, the cycle of moral failure becomes inevitable. The mansion's rotting walls are a physical extension of the family's spiritual decay. It shows how the pursuit of excess eventually hollows out human connections, leaving behind only the hunger that Hostar represents. The modern city is often a phantasmagoria, a visually spectacular display of wealth that masks the hypervisibility of the poor. This vertical divide places the luxury high-rise in direct physical opposition to the sprawling slums below. Deepa Anapara's Djinn Patrol on the Purple Line explores this through the eco-gothic. Here, environmental degradation isn't just a backdrop, it's a predatory force that actively threatens the vulnerable. Look at the smog. The children in the slums anthropomorphize this toxic air into a djinn, a spirit that whispers to them and hides the very real humans who are kidnapping their friends in the shadows of the Said. While the slums suffocate, the wealthy retreat into hi-fi towers, isolated and gated. Yet these enclaves of privilege breed their own terror, reflected in the history of suicides at high-rises like the Grand Paradise Towers, where isolation becomes its own kind of haunting. Modern urban design uses architecture to separate us. It turns the environment into a weapon, sheltering the elite while condemning the marginalized to a slow, toxic violence in the smog below. The ghosts, the cursed gods, and the whispering djinns are all narrative decoys. They are the monsters we invent to avoid looking at the villains we've actually built. The murders and exploitation are carried out by ordinary people, empowered by failing, corrupt systems under the guise of progress. These spaces show the architecture of exploitation hasn't disappeared, it evolved, trading the colonial bungalow for the capitalist mansion and the neoliberal high-rise. Decolonizing our perspective means recognizing these power structures for what they are. It requires us to stop blaming the supernatural and start questioning the laws and designs we accept as natural.
Indian Gothic fiction forces us to confront the dark so we can recognize the systems operating within it. Accountability begins by facing the structures we've built before the house completely collapses around us.